going to share my screen here. And I just wanted to focus our discussions today, and so that you all know that we have 4 guests joining us. And we wanted to try to focus the end of the school year, focusing on some professional STEM jobs out there. And we thought, what better way to do that than to have real professionals come and join us. And I think that we're all really lucky because these 4 professionals have connections to Pickaway County and to Teays Valley. We have alumni that have graduated from Teays Valley. We have husbands of teachers. We have future son-in-laws maybe coming on board. And so I think that we should be really excited about who we have in our community, and hopefully we'll be surprised to learn some of the STEM careers that we have. And I also wanted to just say that STEM Club and people that we bring in and us, that we are your professional contacts. We're your network. You're starting it early on. And if you find anything fascinating, if you want to learn more, you should be able to keep in touch with us and email and keep us in mind, even if it's been a couple years and you're in middle school or high school. Just know that it's important to build and continue this community of STEMers, okay? So today we have 4 STEM professionals. We have William Miller Little, who has been in the medical area for a number of years, and he went back to school to continue his program, and he's going after an MD, Ph.D, and a medical candidate and researcher at Case Western Reserve University School. He's focused on medicine, and he's working out of the Department of Pathology and Immunology, and he's also active in researching in a lab. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because he's going to share all of the stuff that he's working on and specializing in studying. Melissa Smith, who is a botanist. It's a tough word for me. And a clinical lab supervisor technician at OSU Medical Center in the outpatient care on the East Lab. And we're going to learn a little bit about what it means to be an outpatient client or an inpatient client. And then we have Clay Burgett, who is a chemist and a senior information technologist manager in application technologies. And he works for American Chemical Society. And he's also the husband to a Teays Valley High School teacher. And I should also add that Melissa is a STEM mom. And then we have Carrie Hankenhoff, who is a product engineer and lab technician, and she specializes in materials and mechanical systems within the Cincinnati Testing Labs in Cincinnati, Ohio. And she grew up in Pickaway County and went to Teays Valley and graduated. And so she's really excited to come and talk to you guys and wishes she had STEM Club. So what I was thinking, if all of you could just give a very brief introduction of yourself and a little bit about what you do, and then I'll open it up to questions that I have that you guys could answer. So Will, if you wanted to start.
Sure. So I'm Willie Miller Little. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I actually live in Cleveland, Ohio now. So I guess Megan told us that, and I probably knew this when I was a 5th grader, 4th grader, but it's hard to see far enough ahead of you into a career and sort of seeing what steps get you there. So she mentioned that I went back to school. So I went through middle school, through high school. I went to a 4-year college, and then I worked for a few years in a research laboratory studying immunology and diseases, which I'll get back to. And then I decided to go back to school after that. And I joined a program that is sort of an MD and a PhD dual degree program. So I'm going to get both degrees at the end of it, but that's about 8 years more school after college. So people say be a student of life. I think that means both learning every day and also going to school for your entire life, which I'm sure for all of you it feels like is happening anyway.
I
Are
imagine
we
it's
gonna?
pretty important though to go back to school for something you really enjoy, because then it
It's
doesn't seem like a drag. It's really exciting and
That's
fun.
true. Yeah, any homework is basically homework I'm assigning for myself to do because I enjoy doing it at this point, which might also be difficult to imagine. Do we want to do a quick introduction like that and then come back, or should I just go through?
Why don't you just go a little bit further and maybe on
Okay.
kind of geographically where you kind of hopped around and what you were
Okay.
doing?
So I grew up in Cleveland, as I mentioned. I went to Kenyon College for a 4-year undergraduate degree, which is sort of northeast of Columbus, about 45 minutes. Yeah, Judy, I'm sure you guys have heard of Kenyon through Judy. And then I moved to Dallas and worked at a university there for 3 years. And now I'm back in Cleveland. And so that's sort of been my roundabout progression to stay in the same place.
And have you been able to keep in touch with colleagues and friends?
Yeah. So you mentioned your network starts now. Your network really starts now, and never feel embarrassed about going back to somebody that you haven't talked to in a while. When I was working in a lab in Dallas, I got to know a lot of the professors and teachers there. And so when I was coming back to school in Cleveland, I asked them if they knew any mentors that would be good to train with. And I got various lists, and I remember a conversation with one of them where he said, the person that I'm actually currently training with now, if I could get into her lab, I would be assured a great education and training. So I think there are two parts to a network. One, they can help you figure out problems as they arise, but also they can give you very good advice, and they can speed you along at steps that might take longer otherwise.
Okay. Thank you. Melissa, did you want to give a little intro to what you've been up to and career paths?
Sure. My name is Melissa Smith, and as you can see, my son Smith, he's part of the STEM Club too.
Melissa, you may have to speak up a little bit. You're quiet. Sorry.
Is that better?
Oh, that is definitely better.
I think I was doing it with my hand over the mic. I have worked for OSU Wexner Medical Center for 16 years, almost 16 years. And I started off at the James. I am a lab supervisor, and I started off as a phlebotomist. Kind of got started when I went to school and didn't do or graduate with anything related to what I'm doing now. But it also kind of led me into the medical profession in the beginning to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And in the beginning, with the education I had, we started off and getting to know people that were in different professions and kind of seeing what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. And in the medical center, what do you focus on?
We draw a lot of blood for the doctors and the laboratory testers, and even the aspect of the medical professionals with doctorates and stuff like that, to test to see if you're doing better or if you're how healthy you are, and so on and so forth. Being involved in the health field, as a phlebotomist, you see, all aspects of life of people who are healthy, and you see people who are not so healthy. Being a phlebotomist kind of tells you what's going on with your body itself, kind of take it down a notch to understand.
When you were in college, going for your first degree, what kind of classes were you interested in, and what helped to make the decision to switch majors?
Well, all of the class kind of revolved in the beginning around like biology and mathematics and so on and so forth. So those were basics. It wasn't until I started working in the hospital that I realized being in a lab where I truly want to be, because working in the I had before, being in an inpatient unit is where patients stay versus an outpatient unit where people come and go within hours or minutes. So deciding if I wanted to take care of, kind of like a nurse, which everyone understands, they in a hospital setting take care of patients that stay for somewhat of a time, versus an outpatient, it's like a doctor's visit or whatever. So early on, I realized I didn't want to. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just curious, are you involved with the blood work, taking the blood work, and do you also then go to the lab and do any analysis of the blood work?
Yes, we do the blood in our lab, and we do some quick result testing.
Okay.
For doctors' offices that are needing rapid results, versus someone that be like in the lab itself, like a medical lab tech.
Do you feel like a phlebotomist has to have good people skills and kind of coping skills?
And it has to have great people skills.
Okay. I'm gonna shift it over so Clay can introduce himself. Thanks, Melissa. If you just want to give us a little intro on what you do now and kind of maybe some big steps you took to get there.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. So my name is Clay Burgett. I'm currently an IT manager for the American Chemical Society. My job is to manage the technologies that are used to publish chemistry articles. So there are researchers around the world who do chemistry research. A lot of them are at university labs, such as kind of like the program that Willie is in, and or industrial labs, companies around the world, and they will do scientific research, especially in the areas of chemistry. And after they do some experiments, they want to publish their results. So they will publish the results of their work with a company like mine. And again, my team is responsible for the computer programs, the tools, and the technologies that are used to transform the raw research report, the write-up, into a final professional-looking, high-quality publication.
Okay. And have you always done this kind of where you're at in the Columbus area?
I've always been with this company. So I was really interested in science and technology as a kid. I loved astronomy, loved the stars, and I loved doing research and just kind of curious about science and technology. So I majored in chemistry when I went to college at Denison University, just east of Columbus. I did some research at Denison, and I decided that I wanted to continue to work in science in some way after I graduated college. So I found a job with the American Chemical Society, and I actually started in the publishing unit, actually reading the articles that were going to be published and editing them and making sure that they read nicely. A lot of those articles are written by researchers who don't speak English. So a part of my job was to help make those papers look and sound good. Okay. So I did that job for about 5 or 6 years. And then I got into management and leadership, and I was a leader of the publishing operation. And then about 3 years ago, I moved over onto the technology side of the company. So now I don't really work with those chemistry research articles anymore, but I manage the technologies that are used for those. And it's really exciting. It keeps me close to science. Even though I'm not practicing science, I'm not doing research, it keeps me close to it. We are, as everyone on the call probably knows, how many people had heard of what a coronavirus was, prior to a few months ago. But now I think everyone probably knows what that is. At least you've heard of it. Well, now we're publishing articles about it. And I love working for a company that is helping the world by providing research information to researchers and labs around the world so that they can help solve the problem with the pandemic. So even though I'm not practicing science now, my background and interest in science has allowed me to stay close to it and be able to help people in some way with the work that I do.
Okay. I just kind of want to stress, because I think you're kind of the middleman to a lot of connections in the scientific field. And I just want the kids, you guys should understand that when you're a scientist and you're a researcher, the way that you communicate and share your information is through academic journals. And they're kind of like the highlights magazines that you may get a subscription for, and it talks about all the things that you're interested in. But if you're a scientist, you want a magazine that has a whole bunch of research. And you want to make sure that you share your research in a very scientific manner, so one scientist can understand another scientist's work. And then oftentimes they share it in academic journals, and then they get to go to conferences and travel around the world and share their research. And academic journals are the key that opens up all those doors to collaborate and meet other scientists.
And if I can build on that, Megan, I think a great example with COVID-19. If I'm a researcher and I do some experiments on some aspect of COVID-19 and I publish my results, then you could read that article and it may give you an idea on how to do further research on that. And it's through that collaboration and that community development of a topic where we can grow our overall information and knowledge on a specific topic and solve some big important problems.
Mm-hmm. And they connect scientists from all around the world because these journals are very well known and very sought after. So thank you, Clay. Carrie, did you want to go ahead and kind of introduce where you're at?
Sure. So my name is Carrie Hankenhoff, and I went to Teays Valley, and I graduated high school in 2012. And from there, I went to college at the University of Cincinnati and got my bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. And that was about a 4-year program with some extra months for working at different companies and learning about different jobs that engineers can have. And now I work at a company called Cincinnati Testing Laboratories, and I've been there for 3 years. And I do a job called project engineering, which is kind of managing a program from the start to the finish. And at our lab, we test different materials that are used to build airplanes. So there's many, many, many different materials that are used for different reasons. And we help companies that build airplanes make sure that those materials are safe and that they're going to work right when they're up in the sky to keep everyone safe in the airplanes and make sure that they're not going to fail or get too hot, or if a bird hits the plane, they're not going to mess up.
And from what I kind of understand too, project engineers that are focused on a product like airplanes not only design products to keep the aircraft working in the order that we want it to, but we also want to control how it fails, so that if something does go wrong, you know exactly what's going to happen so that you can have the highest safety during a failure. So maybe the wheels of the airplane, something cracks. So I think that it's almost, you have a big job. You have to understand materials and how they work, and also what kind of impacts that would cause them to fail, and just know the behaviors. And I think some folks that deal with failures are kind of forensics engineers. I don't know if you have any of those folks in your office, but yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And testing is a huge part of making sure we know when materials might fail, because it's pretty expensive to fail an airplane just for practice. But the best way to know is to practice. And so we take tiny samples of different types of metal or other types of materials used in the airplane. And so we know exactly when it'll fail and how strong it is, so that if something happens while it's up in the air, we can say, oh, it'll be okay until it gets to the ground, or it can fly 2 more times and then we have to replace that part. And that's really important for airplanes because they are used so much. Every single day, one airplane, you know, could take 2 or 3 flights. So we need to know and track what could happen.
Okay. So it's kind of similar to the medical field, except you're an airplane doctor for parts.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Is there anything, and this is kind of open for the 4 panelists, but is there any experiences that really are vivid and stick out in your mind that really projected, like at least got you on this path or this track professionally? Because oftentimes we do make decisions or experience things that kind of change. And so like Melissa went to school for 1 degree, she had some experiences and they caused her to take different classes and go into the medical field and learn more about biology and blood and how that works. So I don't know if anyone wants to kind of share something that really sticks, and it could be an intern experience or a co-op experience that you may have had.
I can say something as far as when it comes to my fear of needles. I used to have a huge fear of needles. And if I had not overcome that fear, I don't think I would be where I'm at now and in truly enjoying what I do. And I think only medical professionals sometimes can relate that I love doing what I do, and some people laugh at that, but unless you truly know what that feels like, you don't understand, especially when it comes to drawing blood. And then I also get to draw blood and do some testing on it too.
So I found a short video of just kind of the steps of what it takes to draw blood, and I may want to just pause and show it so that what you're explaining, the kids can kind of visualize. So let me dig up. Let's see.
And you guys, if you're thinking of any questions that you want to ask these guys, you can type it into the chat down at the bottom where it says chat. If you click on that, you can type your message and we'll keep you in mind. And at the end, we'll let you ask your questions.
Yeah, I should also, yeah. I know that you guys may have lots of questions, so definitely pull up the chat box and write them down. Just if you're going to ask them at the end, that's fine, but this will help you in case you forget. Alrighty.
The needle.
pause because I don't want you guys to get grossed out. That's a fake arm. And so this is a kind of a prosthetic arm that has different pipes inside that the blood will flow through. And this is how someone that's studying how to take blood practices on a dummy first so that they don't hurt any person. So don't get grossed.
Make sure the bevel's pointing upwards.
So this is a question, and you can definitely take your mute off if you want, but what direction should the bevel face? Should it face upward or should it face downward? And the bevel is the very tip of the
should
needle.
always be up.
Okay. Let's see if she knows her stuff. Sure does.
All right.
Secure the vein that you want to take the blood from and insert the needle at 20 to 40 degrees in the direction of the vein. You should feel a slight give as it goes into the vein.
So he just said a very important factoid. The angle of the needle entering your skin is very important. You don't want to poke it directly down and you don't want to get too close to the skin. So they said an angle. Does anyone think they remembered the answer? That you have to keep the needle from your skin?
It's 20 to 40.
Let's see. Yep. So if you can keep that angle at 20 degrees or slightly up to 40 degrees, that's the perfect zone to enter the skin at.
Then secure the barrel to the skin so that you're not moving it as you put the vacutainer on. Fill as many vacutainers as you need to with blood.
And now he said a term, the vacuum container, and those vials are kind of vacuums, and there's no, it kind of controls the airflow so that once it's punctured, the blood just flows right into it like a vacuum, and that's why it's super fast.
Again, fixing the barrel to the skin each time you remove or replace the vacutainer. Before you take the needle out, remove the tourniquet, get some cotton wool, cover the site of the needle injection, remove the needle, only putting pressure on once the needle's out. Then get the patient to hold the cotton wool or gauze in place for a minute after you've taken the needle out to catch any bleeding. Thanks for letting me take your blood.
So that's kind of a nice little overview, I think, of blood work, but I also think it shows a lot of things all at once. It shows the skill involved and how when Melissa didn't like needles and may not like blood, you have to really overcome a lot of those fears because you saw how his hand was steady and you have to control what you do with the needle because it's a very precise movement. And next time you get a shot, I just want you to kind of focus and watch what's happening and ask questions and even maybe tell them a thing or two. Another really interesting factoid is the vials that they take the blood in. There's a certain color and an order in which they draw blood. And Melissa can probably go through this really quick, but the order really matters because it eliminates the possibility of contaminating the samples depending on what you're testing for. Oops. And I just wanted to show some of the colors because there is a lot of rainbow colors in tubes. And the very first one they usually take is black and light blue and red. And the black is just a basic blood culture. And they take different amounts of blood for adults than children. And the second one they may take, if it has a light blue, there's a substance in there, sodium chloride, which Judy can probably, or Clay can probably talk about, but it helps the blood congeal together. And the red vials don't have any additives, and this is important for certain laboratory tests. And then there's a whole bunch of other colors that they could take depending on what you need to test for. Some of them help break down the blood and others help preserve. And so there's a lot of science that goes into blood work. Taking the blood and having the right equipment, as well as how you're going to analyze it in the lab. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Melissa?
It's very crucial that they always make sure you have to follow an order, because the additives in certain tubes may interact with the others and cross-contaminate and give out a false positive in the tube itself. So that's why it has to be done in the order that it's given.
Is it difficult to find the veins? I know we have a lot of
It can be.
in our arms. Is there any techniques that you use to make it easier for them?
Drink a lot of water. Yeah, always make sure you drink a lot of water. And I think Blake can actually vouch for that, because I've drawn his blood before for testing that he's done, and made him feel a little bit better than his mom was doing it. But yeah, it's all positional. Having somebody that's not wheeling around and being brave helps. Making sure you drink a lot of liquids the night before helps also.
Okay, thanks for those tips. Is there anyone else that can think of certain experiences that kind of influenced decisions that they made about their career? I know Carrie had some, well, you had 5 semesters, it sounds like, of working at companies and interning and cooperative work. I don't know if that kind of helped you get to where you're at or help make decisions for you.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to work for 3 different companies during college, and they all were very different, and I did different things at each one. And that kind of helped me understand all the different things that mechanical engineers can do. And one was kind of more of a design job, and one was in like a big manufacturing company where they made washing machines. And another one was at a medical company where they made different medical devices and like the needles that you saw in that video. So all of those things were opportunities for mechanical engineers, and that kind of helped me understand, you know, school and some classes were really challenging, but I really liked where I could go at the end. Like once I got my degree, I knew that there was a lot of different options depending on what kind of subjects I was better at or ones that I felt challenged. And something else that helped me decide I wanted to pursue engineering was an engineering camp at Ohio State that I went to one summer when I was in college, when I was in high school. And I'm sure that some of you guys have been to different science camps or different, you know, even sports camps. And sometimes those can really open your eyes to, wow, this is really cool, or wow, I'm not so good at that. And that camp definitely helped me understand, again, the different types of engineers that there are, and some of the cool things that engineers are involved with. And it's so many different subjects, everywhere from, you know, making cars, making airplanes, to designing toys, designing apps, and there's all different types of things to do. So if you have the chance to do some kind of camp, or even the STEM club is awesome. You're getting exposed to a lot of different opportunities.
Yeah, so we have professionals from the medical area, the research in the medical, engineering, and chemistry. Even though you have that overarching subject, do you feel that you pull from other subjects in the STEM fields in order to do your job? And I don't know if you can.
I can speak to that. You know, I think once you start working in your job, you are learning at a really technical level. How do I do my job? You know, tell me, you know, someone may train you. You may draw upon the experiences that you had when you were in college, and you're going to be using some of the skills and knowledge that you've learned and that you're being taught on how to do your job. if your job is to draw blood every day, and that's a pretty cool example, so I'll use that, then you need to be very good at drawing blood. But you may be interested in doing more than that technical job that you are assigned to. Matter of fact, I think Melissa may have even shared, I think she also helps organize that group. So you may be a supervisor of a number of medical professionals who draw blood. So you need different skills to do that. You need organizational skills. You need good communication skills. You need to be able to solve creative problems that come up that are not directly related to drawing blood, but the business that you might be in is in that specific area. Mm-hmm. So, and for myself, I've always been sort of leadership inclined. You know, I just sort of was always drawn to, whenever I was in a group, whenever I was on a team, in a class, you know, whatever, you know, a lot of times I just sort of gravitated toward helping organize and helping lead the group to perform at a better level. You know, again, even though I'm interested in chemistry and I'm interested in computers and technology, really my job is actually not about chemistry and computers and technology. My job is more about working with people and organizing the team and helping the team work together to solve problems. So Megan, is that sort of touch?
Perfect. Yeah, and I would just throw in there too, you have a lot of technical writing skills that you pull from, perhaps some math skills,
Well, in fact, when I was in college, I got a minor in English. So I was on the science side, on the right brain, and I was on the left brain, the humanities side. And I do feel that allowed me, that helped me in my career to have different types of opportunities, whether they were technical or whether they were not really all that technical.
And for the students that are listening, what he just mentioned, we talked about chemistry careers out there, and we talked about the schooling involved. And I just want you to know that in college, you can often specialize in one big thing like chemistry, like Clay did. And then you can take a minor in something. And you don't take as many classes, but you do take classes in another specialized area. And so when you do make decisions about school, just know that you can specialize in multiple things. And that could be a really good thing if you can handle that. So you don't have to pick just one thing. I had a question for Will. If you could share with the kids, well, and I think a lot of STEM professionals go into the sciences to help people. That's one of their driving factors. And I don't know if there's people in your lives, and Will in particular, if you can just talk about maybe why you're in the medical research side.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so first I want to talk about Clay's point, because I think people think of science as you're either, you know, using a pipette or doing chemistry experiments, but so much of it is talking to people and communicating either with writing or speaking or giving presentations, that it's really important to have those skills as well. So sort of paying attention in all of the classes getting up through school is also important. So my dad is a scientist as well. And so growing up, there were a lot of his friends around that. Basically, there were just a lot of scientists in my life that were sort of good models to look up to. And so my best friend's dad also is a medical researcher. And so they seemed to really enjoy their jobs. And I never really had any idea what their jobs actually were growing up, but I knew that they liked them. And that was sort of enough for me to sort of start pursuing that research as an option when I started going to high school and into college. And there were even times in college that I didn't love all of the classroom laboratory classes that I took. But then once I sort of did internships in the summer, it looked very different in the real world versus in some classes. And I think that it's important to take any opportunity you get to do internships or outside learning that's not only classroom learning.
Do you think that those experiences, and maybe Carrie's too, not all subjects are fun all the time, and not all of them come to people easy? And so I think that the more experiences that you get in the real world, they put things in perspective and they motivate you to get through a subject that's really difficult for you.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. Is there any hard classes that you can remember struggling with and how you kind of overcame those?
I think there were a few. I think organic chemistry, so I ended up being a chemistry major and then switched immediately into biology research. So organic chemistry was not the easiest. What was it? Physical chemistry and thermodynamics was not an easy class for me. There was a lot of math in that.
Physical chemistry.
It was, yeah, it was 8 in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But I made it through it. And what's that?
Thermochemistry, one of the, Briley wanted to know if you have ever made anything explode. For any of you guys could speak to that.
Are we limiting this to classrooms?
I don't know.
I think it well, it depends how you define it. Because if we just define it as a slightly uncontrolled chemical reaction, I'm sure that's happened. But I've never had large explosions that caused harm.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So far, I guess it's.
One thing I guess I can ask you, and I also heard this it was a research study published in a journal, but they took
those journals.
This is important for kids to think, because you have a lot more control of your education in your schedule when you leave high school and you go into college, and you can decide what classes you want to take, when you want to take them. And one thing I want you to keep in mind is sometimes early in the morning, our minds do not work well. And this journal study found that whatever class you took at 8 a.m. usually is not the subject you ended up majoring in. And the classes that you took later in the day, you enjoyed more and participated in a more positive mindset, and they really influenced the career path that you ended up doing. So it's a little bit of life advice, but the classes that you may find the most interesting, try to take those a little bit later in the day.
Okay, that was not the case for me. My honors chem
You're an
class
early
were
bird.
8 o'clock every quarter, every time. Every time.
Yeah. Let me hop back to our questions here. Some of you mentioned problem solving, but maybe you can kind of stress a little bit about how in the different careers that you have, some problem solving scenarios that you can remember, and it could be managing people. It could be working through an experiment that failed and now you have to problem solve through it. It could be getting that report of that plane failure and it didn't fail the way that it was supposed to, and how you kind of worked through it. So I don't know if you guys have a story about problem solving, or at least how that's a really important skill set to have.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. To me, I think problem solving is one of the most critical skills that a good employee can have, that anyone in any field. If you are, and here's the way that I think about it. If you have a job to do, most of the time it's probably going to be, things are probably going to work the way that you think they should work. And I can hire people to do those jobs. Sometimes they need special skills, but I can hire people to do those jobs, and I can teach them how to do that. But really being a valuable worker, being a valuable employee is your ability to solve problems, the unexpected, how to handle the problems that come up throughout the day. And there are people who I work with who don't know how to solve those problems. They come to me and they say, what do I do? How do I do this? And that takes up my time from my job, and that can be frustrating at times. So I really value people who come to me and say, hey, I have this problem and I've looked at it and I've studied it, and here's how I'd like to solve it. And then we talk about that problem and the problem solving aspect of that. So that's sort of my thought there on problem solving. I remember, so we have, my current job is in technology, and we have, hundreds of computer programs and tools and applications that we use to do our publishing job. And as all of you guys know on the phone, computers shut down, they freeze up. Zoom will crash on you. Your phone just freezes up on you. And no one really knows why a lot of times. Sometimes, number one rule when you're trying to solve a technology problem, actually, let me ask the group. This is a fun question, I think. What is the number one way to try to solve a technology problem? Any kind of electronics problem. What's the number one thing to do?
What do you guys think? Unmute your mics and tell them.
Do you know what the power button is? Turn it off and turn it back on. And a lot of times that'll fix half the problems.
Yeah.
That's just a fun example, but things, and 90% of my job is trying to help problem solve the different technology problems that occur on the people who work for our company. So yeah, definitely an important skill there. And it's not fun. Sometimes you're sitting there scratching your head for a while, and you may talk to a colleague, and you may, how have you handled this problem in the past? You get frustrated. You may need to walk away and come back and try again later. But definitely problem solving is a very important skill for not just STEM. It's really any job.
Life skill. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So last year we had the Civil Air Patrol come to our STEM club, and they talked about airplanes, and they talked about aerodynamics. And so the kids got a little opportunity to play around with them and to understand some of the components of airplanes, or maybe why the wings are shaped the way they're shaped, and how the pilots control them to maneuver the planes. We talked about pitch, and we talked about the axes of a plane. And so I was going to see if Carrie could walk us through some additional vocabulary of an airplane. So I'm going to share my screen. And I don't know, Carrie, if you wanted to just kind of walk us through and explain some of the features and what they do.
Sure. So I don't even know all of these. And there's a type of engineering where you can learn them all called aerospace engineering. But I do know some of the key parts, and definitely parts that we test materials for. And so if you start at the left side of the picture, you can see the nose of the airplane, and it's pretty curved on every airplane. It's important for the way the airplane flies through the air that it kind of cuts through an air wall, so it helps it to go faster. And that's why airplanes can go so much faster than cars. And we need them to go really fast if we want to get, if we want to make an airplane worthwhile and not just go somewhere in our car. And then you can see on the top part of the picture, the flight deck, and that's where the pilot will sit, and that's where all the controls are. And it's important that they're in the front, just like in a car, the driver's seat, so they can see where they're going. They can see obstacles up ahead, maybe birds or weather. You can see the rain or hail or all these things pretty clearly, or even when we're going to approach some clouds. And then that word in the middle is pronounced fuselage. And that is kind of the cylinder center part of the airplane. And usually that's made of a really thin metal. And airplanes are held together by something called rivets. And that's pretty important because they're stronger than just using like a nail. They fasten to themselves, and so it helps the airplane to be able to go really fast and to absorb different forces of the air around it. And then the cabin is where the passenger sits. So if you've ever been on a plane, you've been in the cabin, and that's where your chair is, and where they walk up the middle with the snack cart, which is obviously the best part of a flight. And then you can see on the right side of the picture the fin and the tail and the tailplane, and all of those help the airplane with its directions. So those are all pretty important whenever the pilot is flying an airplane. Those are some of the things they can control, and that helps the airplane to be able to go up or down or turn. Just little movements of those sections of the airplane can change the direction really easily. And then we can see the wing, and right underneath that is the jet engine. And there's a jet engine on each side of the plane, and those are really important because they power the plane, but there's tons of materials in those, and that's a big part of what we test at my company, are all the materials in that engine, because the outside of it is metal, but the inside has different parts that are called ceramics, and those help make up the little fan blades inside the jet engine, and those can get really, really hot and still be strong. And so it's important to test those, but they're also really brittle. So it's kind of like a plate, like a dinner plate. They can get pretty hot. You can put them in the microwave, but if you drop it, it'll shatter. And so that's kind of what the material is like, but it can get way hotter than a dinner plate. And then I'm not sure exactly what the hold is on the back. That's probably just like the back door. And then the undercarriage is just the wheels and different things that help come down whenever the airplane is landing.
Yeah, the hold, from what I kind of gathered, was the place where the cargo entered the plane. And for the most part, we don't ever see that when we board the plane because that's kind of happening in the back.
Yeah.
Now I may quiz you guys on this, so take one last look on where the nose of the plane is and the tail. Those are kind of obvious.
Yeah, make sure you know all the parts.
The plane's wings really help with the stability, and there's one that's going horizontal and there's another one that's going vertical. And then the large wings really help the plane take a lift off and stay in the air. So all of those parts are pretty important to an airplane, and they all have a lot of different materials. One thing I read, a lot of material engineers, they study a lot of different materials in college, but the main material they study is metal. And I don't know if you have any additional thoughts, or if you could relate to that, if metal really dominates your material of research.
Yeah, so we do tons of metal testing because it's one of the most widely used in a lot of different industries. And it's important to choose the correct metals whenever you're making different things, because you might want it to do different things. Like for airplanes, it's important to pick a metal that's strong but is also pretty light, so that airplanes can be in the sky with all of the added people and your suitcases and all the other things that go on an airplane. But cars don't necessarily need to be as light, so they can be used, they can use different other metals that are maybe just stronger, or something else, like we talked about with the plane, how we're planning for it to fail and knowing what will happen. Like with cars, they're made and designed so that if they crash into something, they'll fail in a way that protects people. So harder metals might be, or heavier metals might be used on the top part of the car, and lighter metals might be used on the bottom, because the heavier metals will protect you if you're in an accident or if you hit something on the road. And it's important that those metals can either crumple in the right way or, you know, stay rigid if they need to. And so, yeah, I would say, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say cars are a really good example, because I think when you think of mechanical engineering and you think of structural engineers who focus on the body work, and we think of cars, you think that they design them so that they can drive a certain way. And in truth, that is part of the design, but a huge part of car design, and probably similar to airplanes, is how to design the car to crash. And so the whole design is just to get that failure, because they want to preserve life. And so if the car is going to crash, they want to control all of the structural components in such a way so it does do that accordion crash and it saves the passengers' lives.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I had one question for Will, because usually in a research field, you kind of specialize in an area. And so I was going to show a really short clip, and then I was hoping you could talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have this autoimmune disease, and it seems like it's a big term, and maybe you think what you know what it is, but I thought it would just be nice to kind of get a little video so that Will could talk a little bit about his research.
Let's get into autoimmune diseases, what they are, what they do, and the facts you need to know your body. Here's the breakdown. Our immune system is a network of special cells and organs that protect the body from disease and infection. The immune system can tell the difference between self and non-self, basically what's you and what's foreign. With an autoimmune disease, there's a glitch, and your body can't tell the difference, so it makes autoantibodies that attack healthy cells by mistake. There are over 80 different types that can affect almost any part of the body. Some common ones are rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes, lupus, celiac, Hashimoto's, and multiple sclerosis. Statistics vary on how many Americans have an autoimmune disease, with the National Institutes of Health estimating 23.5 million and AARDA quoting 50 million. One reason for the difference is how many types of diseases are included in the data counts. Symptoms are as vast as the parts of the body and can include fatigue, muscle aches, fever, depression, and inflammation. It can take a lot of visits to a lot of different specialists to be able to find the right diagnosis. A specialist focuses on treating diseases of a particular system of the body. A rheumatologist treats diseases affecting the joints and connective tissue. A neurologist deals with the central nervous system. And gastroenterologists treat the intestines. The causes of autoimmune diseases remain a mystery to solve, but there are some connecting factors. They can be inherited, so we know genes play a part, and environmental triggers like an infection or chemical exposure can sometimes create an autoimmune response. They're more common in women than men, and some tend to affect certain groups of people. Type 1 diabetes is more common in Caucasians, while lupus is most severe for African Americans and Hispanics. Treatments differ depending on the type of disease, so let's talk to an expert. Dr. Lakshan, what are the treatment options for someone with an autoimmune disease, and is there a cure?
Well, there's not really a cure, but in terms of treatments, we have anti-inflammatory drugs, corticosteroids, antimalarials, and we have drugs called immunosuppressives.
So basically those drugs just keep the body from attacking itself, right?
That's the aim of those drugs.
I've read that diet could impact autoimmune diseases. How do lifestyle decisions factor in?
Well, diet works in two ways. Some people think that diseases are actually driven by things that you eat or things that you encounter in your environment. There's no single answer for every patient. You have to experiment.
It sounds like autoimmune diseases play by their own rules, so how can we win?
The best way is to have doctors talk to doctors from one specialty to another to describe and compare and evaluate the patient all as one team.
Thank you, Dr.
Okay. So, well, that kind of gave just like a general overview of that type of autoimmune disease, but not only do doctors need to be talking to doctors, but researchers play a big part in that because they inform doctors. And I also would say that Clay is very involved because he's probably reading the journal entries and writing the academic textbooks that are informing both students and professionals. And I'm sure that there's a lot of blood work that happens with testing the autoimmune diseases. And I could probably follow up with Melissa and a lot of her lab testings if her patients are struggling with autoimmune diseases. So if you want to kind of talk about that and how you focus your research.
Yeah, so that's a very good introduction to autoimmune diseases. And the important part being it's also a brief introduction to the immune system, which she said it perfectly. Basically, the whole job of your immune system is to decide what is you and what is not you. And your body doesn't want anything that's not you floating around. So if you get bacteria or viruses, Clay mentioned the coronavirus, that's one virus that your immune system attacks and tries to get rid of. And sometimes it goes wrong. And so the immune system starts to attack parts of your own body. So in my lab, we study actually a number of them. My boss really built her career on how cells in the immune system talk to each other, which allows us to study different immune diseases, but I study multiple sclerosis. And he mentioned the drugs that are used to treat these diseases: anti-inflammatories, steroids, anti-malarials. I kind of forget the last one. But my project is really trying to figure out why it is that some patients with multiple sclerosis don't get better when they're treated with steroids. Because some diseases will not respond to some of those drugs. And so as that's happening, let's say I made a discovery in lab. If I didn't have Clay or Clay's company to produce a paper written about it and tell other researchers, a couple of things could happen. One, no one would ever know about it and it wouldn't change the world in any way, which is not the goal of research. Or two, somebody else would do it somewhere else and it would just use the same exact resources and it would cost everybody just a ton of money to do the same research over and over again and still not change the world at all if nobody else knows about it. So the communicating through journals is important. There's also, when people are on these drugs, they need to have their blood drawn pretty frequently, and they need to measure the immune cells in the blood because they float around in the blood. And then there are other markers of tissue damage that can be measured. So really it's talking to doctors, talking to everybody in the hospital who's dealing with the patients directly, in some cases talking to patients directly, and then communicating with other researchers. So it just really starts with a few experiments and very quickly turns into a giant web of people all trying to make people healthier.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Melissa, did you want to add anything? I don't know if you, obviously taking blood from someone with an autoimmune disorder, I don't know if there's anything different that you do.
Well, the more that they have blood on, the more difficult it becomes to draw their blood.
Could you repeat that one more time?
The more that patients have blood drawn, the more difficult it can become to draw their blood. Their veins are not as good. The blood flow doesn't, make or emphasize the veins as well. And if they're not with an autoimmune disease, they're not as healthy as someone that doesn't have it. So that's all factors. And then you want to make sure that each result that they have it done, depending on the plan of care that the doctor has done. You want to make sure their blood draw is as consistent as possible, making sure the test is done correctly and so on and so forth.
I had this one picture that I thought was important, and I was going to see if you could kind of explain this a little bit. But when we cut ourselves, we just see this liquid coming out of us, and it's reddish, dark. And when we go to the doctor, they stick us with a needle and they put in the different colored tubes and they take our blood, and some of those tubes have different additives. And some of them, like we talked about, breaks down the blood. Some of them congeals it. Some of them keeps it really watery and liquidy. But there's a lot of different parts in our blood. And sometimes we want to separate and sometimes we want to keep together. But if you could just kind of explain the white blood cells or the plasma or like those components of our blood and how what you do and the additives kind of react to those parts of our blood.
Sorry. Yeah, it just depends on what kind of medicine they're on, whether it breaks down the platelets, how fast, things are broken down with, what type of medications they're on too. The blood vessels, whether they're flowing as fast as possible, and the test that needs to be done on it also.
And can you tell us the difference a little bit about our white blood cells versus our red blood cells? I know one of them, I think, kind of is the army in our blood that fights things.
Yeah, so the red blood cells are important for bringing oxygen. So when you breathe in oxygen, it'll get picked up by those little red donuts and brought all around your body so that your whole body gets oxygen, which is very important. The white blood cells, they're kind of blue here. They're actually probably a few different kinds right there. There are multiple different kinds of white blood cells, but they all make up the immune system, and those are sort of the defensive the army, as you mentioned, that protect you from infections. And then the little wiggly guys, the platelets, are if this blood vessel is cut, their job is to bind to each other and to any damage and close up any blood vessel that's ruptured so that it stops bleeding, basically.
So if people have a disorder where their blood doesn't congeal and stop, does that mean that they don't have a lot of platelets or they're just not working right?
Yeah, basically. Or there can be a few other reasons, but there are drugs that people take which will inhibit which will prevent platelets from working properly, which can lead to bleeding.
Okay. And then the plasma is a substance that's pretty important. And it's also a substance that they separate from blood donors for certain infusions. So yeah, did everyone know that that is what's in our blood? Like if you looked under a microscope, I don't know if you've done that in science class yet. Okay, so I'm gonna quiz you. Let me pull it up. Everyone get ready because you're gonna have to unmute yourselves to talk to me because I'm not gonna do this all by myself. Alrighty. And for the panelists that are not material engineers, they're allowed to participate.
I don't know if I'll help you though.
Ready, gang? Okay. So if I were to grab a wing, can one of you tell me where I should drag it to? Should I go to the top of the plane, the front of the plane?
Go ahead, Abigail, yell it out.
You should go to like the middle of the plane, but the one that looks like the wing.
Right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, where should I throw the nose? Should I throw it here?
Right here, or like at the very front.
Now, STEM is all about writing and communicating, and right now we're practicing our verbal skills. So you're gonna have to think how to help me figure out what part of the plane I should drag this. Now I got the tail. Do we have a new taker? Can someone tell me if the tail is
Yes.
here? Should I go up? Should
Go
I
ahead, you guys.
left?
You can talk.
Tell me if I should stop. At,
All the way on the back.
okay. So now where do all the people go? Who sits in these like window seats? What part of the plane is that?
The cabin.
The cabin.
Let's drag that over here. And what do we call the area of the plane where the wheel pops out when it's ready to land and it goes in when it's ready to take off?
Undercarriage.
Under.
Now, what about that big turbojet area of the plane that crumbles if it's hit, but it can resist really high temperatures?
Jet engine.
Jet engine. And where is the jet engine?
The jet engine is the big bulky part under the wing that breaks.
Now I need to know what the very thin metal of the plane is. What is that called? Up here? Very thin.
You guys remember what Carrie told you?
Is it the fuselage?
Oh, let's see. Gotta take a chance. All right, so now let's focus on, so Carrie wasn't 100% familiar with the hold, and I'm the one who said, I think it's where the cargo enters the plane, but I'm not 100%. Do you remember where that is in the plane?
It's the little door-looking thing behind the cabin.
Okay.
That one.
Now, where do we think the fin goes? Sounds like it's on a fish, but it's on an airplane. And what do fins do on fish?
The fin would go at the very bottom, right where your mouse was a second ago.
Right here? Okay.
Yes.
Drag that over there. Now, here's the pilots. Where are they? What is that called?
What do you think, Louie? Spell it out.
We have a tailplane left, and we have
Flight deck.
Now, that leaves us with tailplane. Does everyone think that that's what that is?
Sorry, I zoned out.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. I'm going to submit them.
Great job.
Yay! Oh, that dragged. Oh, why did that do that?
Yeah,
Well,
we know you got them right.
Oh,
It's
yeah, I
okay.
don't know why that
No,
threw the
right.
jet. So I will end that. I'm going to stop sharing so we can all see each other. And then I want to see if you guys have any questions for our panelists. We have Melissa, Clay.
I just want to add that
Yeah.
last little bit was a great example of when critical thinking is important, because we knew we got them all right, but the test told us we got them all wrong. Don't just believe the test as you see it.
Yes.
If it doesn't make any sense and it should be right, then you need to understand when a test is wrong or an experiment is poorly set up.
Does anyone have any questions at all? This is your one opportunity. Is anyone thinking about going into the medical field? You can raise your hand if you want.
None of you? Yeah.
Is anyone afraid of blood, or does anyone looking forward to 5th grade and 6th grade math class and taking some labs? Anyone's gonna take high school chemistry with Miss Wally?
Yeah.
When we watched the video,
high school.
Go ahead.
when we watched the video where the guy drew blood with a fake arm, I still got grossed out because I'm not a big fan of blood.
Me too, Abigail.
I think people that give blood and people that take blood both have to get over that fear. Or drink or
Yeah.
afterward. Is there anyone that really enjoys writing and could imagine being a technical writer to the sciences?
I enjoy writing, but it's not my favorite thing in the world.
Do you enjoy writing about things that you're interested in?
Yeah.
One thing
That's
that
my favorite writing.
Yeah, one thing that I think would be really cool to do over the summer is to get out a good old-fashioned journal or start a Word doc on your computer and just kind of every couple days write down what you've been up to and start thinking about what ideas or problems or inventions that you are thinking about. It's really important to write and to be alone and in your mind, and you'll be surprised on what it kind of defines. And every year that you go to school, different things will start making more and more sense to you. Math subjects will start making sense because you see how it solves problems. And it also is an opportunity to figure out who you are and what you enjoy doing and what you like and what you really struggle with. But it's good to identify those strengths and weaknesses, because even if we have weaknesses, we have to overcome them, right? The fear of blood, the struggle with chemistry or physics, we just have to like go over it. But it's really good to figure out who you are. And sometimes you figure that out while you're journaling. So I know that it's not as cool as playing Roblox, but it's still very important. And you may not even know what to write in the beginning, but just start doing that.
Okay, well, we've enjoyed having virtual STEM with you guys, and keep a watch because we're thinking we might do a couple things in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Judy and I, and even probably Ellison, we could tie in, but we thought we'd do a couple specials because we don't want to stop talking about science and engaging you guys. So look forward to that. And parents, there may be an email coming out to you just to kind of evaluate the program. So if you wanted to check your emails in the next week, look for that from OSU. But this is new for us. I hope that it wasn't the same as our cool hands-on projects, but it was fun to see you guys, even though we're in this pandemic.
Okay,
All right.
does anyone have anything else? Hi, Louie.
I'm really appreciative of everyone's time, and I'm glad that you stuck through it. And I know you kids have a lot of Zoom meetings for school, so thank you for giving us one more.
Panelist?
Yeah, I appreciate all of the panelists. We'll put their email addresses in the blog, and if you have any questions that you forgot to answer, and you may not think about it until a year from now when you're taking a certain class, feel free to email them and just remind them about STEM Club, and they would love to help you out. All righty, gang.
Hey, take care, everybody. Have a safe summer.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Mrs.
Thanks for
Wally.
having us.
Take care. Abigail, tell your dad hi.
And thanks, Melissa, for doing this from your car.
I know.
She's trying.
Mrs. Wally, can I have a virtual hall pass to go to my next?
Yes, of course. Yeah, you guys, that is what happened. Our his wife's classes and mine overlapped. And I was like, where is everybody? Where is everybody? And so some people started doing both, trying to do both classes at once. And so his